Welcome to class, students. Mr. Clark here to tell you a little something about America before Columbus. And that's right, definitely was a thing before Columbus showed up. Was most likely a thing about 12,000 to 20,000 years ago when the people of Asia possibly crossed the Bering Land Bridge and started to populate the continent. So before the Europeans show up, there is about 6 million people already on the North American continent, and there are over 1,000 different tribes of Native Americans. One tribe that is focused on in the article is the tribe that creates the ancient civilization at Cahokia. So if you are to drive to modern-day St. Louis, and you're driving down Interstate number 70, you'll drive right by a giant mound that most people, when they first found it, thought it was built by people that were definitely not natives, or as they would have called them, Indians, which is still a term that baffles my mind because we could have corrected that at some point, because definitely not from India. However, as time went on, they discovered that these mounds were built by an advanced civilization. The largest mound, bigger than the Great Pyramid of Egypt. And in this Cahokia civilization, it was likely that there were several thousand people living in an advanced civilization in modern-day Missouri and Ohio. By the time Europeans showed up, that civilization, however, was already gone. Things like environmental degradation, ecological change, and disease wiped it out before Europeans could get there. Some interesting parts of this civilization were that it included a 2.5-mile long stockade wall and had cornfields that could feed 20,000 to 40,000 people. They also had a circle of tall poles that was called Woodhenge that aligned with the sun at the equinox and the solstice. Along with the tribe of Cahokia, there were many hundreds of other tribes as well, each one as different than the next. Some tribes killed unwanted infants, others had multiple wives, some wiped their hands on dogs that wandered by. They boasted a variety of languages that were as different from Farsi is to French. Some tribes loved war, some hated it. Some tribes allowed women to be a part of their councils, and chiefs, others strictly forbid it. Some believed premarital sex was unthinkable, and others encouraged it. Like their ways of life, their traditions were also diverse as well. The Pima Indians of Arizona had a 16-day cure for insanity after going to war, while the Hurons of the Great Lakes had a specific cure for sickness, which included carrying hot coals around in your mouth. Ouch. The Arikara of North Dakota danced with their hands and feet on hot coals and devoured meat from boiling pots of water. The North American continent was also booming with nature. There was an abundance of animals, including the Pennsylvania trout, which was measured at an average of 2 feet in length. Catfish often topped 120 pounds. Lobsters in the Northeast were fairly easy to catch and often topped 20 pounds. The sturgeon of Virginia came in at 6 to 9 feet. Oysters from Massachusetts had to be cut into thirds in order to be swallowed. There were bison, not only in the Great Plains, but bison in the East Coast as well. However, they were way more numerous in the West and often could be found in herds 25 miles long. The forests of North America seemed endless. It was said that a squirrel could make it from Maine to Mississippi without touching the ground. There was also way more birds. Passenger pigeons could be passing by in flocks for 3 to 4 hours, large enough to block out the sun. There was a very different view of nature by Native American tribes compared to the European explorers. Native Americans seemed to live among nature, while the Europeans followed the Bible, where it stated that man shall have dominion over every living thing. However, all that came to a screeching halt when Europeans came over in larger numbers. On Columbus's second voyage, when Europeans started to stay, a host of new animals, foods, and diseases were brought, changing everything. Europeans often took advantage of native generosity. The settlers also overhunted and overfished the stocks of large animals and fish, and pushing some animals into extinction. Europeans had a desire for accumulation and private property. Natives did not. As a result of European conquest, tribes were often pushed westward, causing them to bump into other tribes on the way, and this created conflict among them. Those who did not move often perished. It is estimated that 90% of Native Americans perished during this time period due to European diseases. Some things the Europeans ended up incorporating into their ways of life as they continued to colonize the country include using a form of government that was made popular or made famous by the Iroquois, who had a system of representative government with freedom of speech and the ability of women to vote. This is often cited as one of the main sources for the United States Constitution. Another important aspect of native life that Europeans adopted was the daily bath or daily bathing habits. They also took their form of agriculture, where they often burned parts of the forest, leaving the ashen ground, which was very fertile, and using it to grow their crops. And growing the crops in the forest themselves also led to other animals eating those crops, making it easier for them to hunt the animals. Native American tribes also were responsible for securing lands from the French and Canada, which eventually became part of the United States. Crops from the American continent also spread across the world, changing the populations of Africa because of corn, and places like China and Europe because of the sweet potato and potato. The story of European conquest is often told as the Old World meeting the New World. However, that is incorrect. According to Herman Viola, who is the head of the Natural Histories Columbus programs, he says, quote, "It is two old worlds that linked up, making one new world." It's important to explore this topic before we get into the United States history itself to recognize that there were things happening here that were just as advanced as Europe and just as important. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something today. And time to move on to that next assignment.